Let's be real. Writing a PhD thesis, it can feel like you're staring up at this impossibly huge mountain and you don't even have a map. It's this massive, lonely, multi-year project. But what if there was a map? A clear, proven roadmap that could turn that overwhelming mountain into a manageable, maybe even exciting journey? Well, there is. And in this explainer, we're going to walk you through it. So here's our plan. We'll kick things off by talking about the core problem, why this feels so hard. Then we'll introduce a really powerful 5-chapter solution. From there, we'll break down how you actually build your argument, present your findings, and finally share the absolute keys to success. By the end of this, I promise you're going to see your thesis in a completely new light. You know that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, just paralyzed when you think about your thesis? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. It's funny, one critic pointed out that many universities give you more precise info about paper margins than about what a thesis should actually be. And that lack of a clear blueprint, that's the real problem here. So this is the million-dollar question, right? How do you take all that hard work, all those experiments, the interviews, those late nights in the library, and wrestle it into a single, powerful, and convincing document? It's not just about writing stuff down. It's about building a compelling argument from the ground up. Okay, so the solution we're looking at today comes from Dr. Chad Perry. He created this unified and focused framework that just brings order to all that chaos. It's a simple, kind of elegant structure designed to help you finish your thesis way more efficiently and with fewer revisions. And look, this isn't just some nice suggestion. It's a proven system that works. So who's the person behind this? It's Associate Professor Chad Perry. The guy's an author of over 100 publications, and he developed this 5-chapter approach based on his own extensive experience supervising and examining theses. So yeah, he knows what he's talking about, and his work gives us a really clear starting point. At the very heart of this framework is a pretty simple 5-chapter structure. First up, the introduction, that sets the stage. Then the literature review, which proves your research is actually needed. Chapter 3, methodology, explains how you did the work. Chapter 4, data analysis, shows what you found. And finally, Chapter 5, conclusions, explains why any of it matters. You can think of it as the skeleton of your thesis. Each part has a very distinct job, but they all come together to form one unified argument. All right, let's start building this thing from the ground up, starting with chapters 1 and 2. These first 2 chapters are all about laying a rock-solid foundation. This is where you have to convince the examiner that your research isn't just interesting, it's absolutely necessary. So chapter 1 is your opening statement. You start with the big picture, right? The broader field of study. Then you act like a funnel, narrowing the focus down, down, down to your very specific research problem. A really common mistake here is trying to summarize your whole thesis right at the beginning. Don't do that. Your only job in this chapter is to pose the question, not to give away the answer. You're building suspense, telling the reader, here's the whole universe of this topic, and here's the one critical question I'm going to solve. Now, Chapter 2. This is a big one, because it is not just a summary of everything you've ever read. It's a critical argument. The biggest mistake people make is just creating a laundry list of studies. No, instead, you are building a case. You're analyzing all the existing knowledge to prove there's a gap, a controversy, a weakness, or an unanswered question that other researchers have totally missed. That gap is the entire justification for your project. So once you've made your case for why your research is so important, it's time to show your work. This is where chapters 3, 4, and 5 come in. I like to think of them as the how, the what, and, maybe most importantly, the so what of your thesis. This is where the framework creates this really clean, really crucial separation of ideas. Chapter 3, your methodology, is literally your how. Think of it like a recipe in a cookbook. The goal is to provide a blueprint so detailed that another researcher could follow it and replicate your study perfectly. Then comes Chapter 4, the analysis, your what. The key word here is objectivity. You present your findings, the facts, the patterns, the data, without interpreting them or comparing them to the literature. A common mistake is to jump to conclusions here. You have to resist. Just present the raw results. The time for interpretation, that comes later. And that brings us to the so what chapter. Chapter 5 is, you could argue, the most important chapter in the whole thing. This is where you bring it all home. You connect your findings from Chapter 4 all the way back to that gap you identified in Chapter 2. You explicitly answer your main research problem, you discuss the implications for academic theory and for the real world, and you point the way for future researchers. You're not just summarizing here, you are explaining the meaning and the value of your work. So that's the structure. But what really separates a good thesis from a great one? Well, Dr. Perry's guide highlights a few overarching principles that are just absolutely critical for success. Okay, if you remember one thing, let it be this. The single most important thing examiners are looking for is this. Your work must make a distinct contribution to knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean you have to win a Nobel Prize. It could be a new method, testing an old theory in a new way, or a new synthesis of ideas. But whatever it is, it has to add something genuinely new to the conversation. And that leads perfectly to the second key, focus. This quote just nails it. Your thesis needs, well, a thesis, one big central idea. It means every chapter, every section, every paragraph has to serve that single core argument. This idea is sometimes called the golden thread. Imagine a single thread of logic that runs all the way from your research question in chapter 1 through everything else, right to your conclusion. An examiner should be able to follow that thread seamlessly from start to finish. That's the sign of a truly great thesis. So when you look at it this way, this 5-chapter structure isn't some rigid box you have to fit into. It's a tool, a really powerful one that transforms a scary, undefined task into a logical, manageable project. It gives your research a clear purpose and a clear path from start to finish. So I'll leave you with the most important question of all, the one that should guide every single decision you make on this doctoral journey. What distinct contribution will your research make?